selection of best fit solutions to improve production, which increases opportunities for formalizing agreements
Food waste occurs along the food supply chain since production and also processing until distribution and consumption. For this project, we focus on the micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSME.
ถ้าเราตากข้าวน้อยไปก็จะทำให้ข้าวเกิดเชื้อราแต่ถ้าเราตากข้าวนานไปข้าวก็จะหักในกระบวนการสีทำให้เราได้ข้าวน้อยลง
After steaming, the rice is dried in the solar dome dryer, which is provided by the government. This solar dryer will help to shorten the drying time. During the drying process, the moisture content of the dry grain is monitored by using the moisture meter that is provided by FAO. The moisture content has to be controlled and monitored in order to reduce the grain breakage in the milling process.
พอเรามีเครื่องวัดความชื้นเข้ามาช่วยสามารถทำให้เราควบคุมคุณภาพข้าวได้สม่ำเสมอแล้วก็สามารถลดการสูญเสียได้ด้วยค่ะ
Micro and small enterprise have their own local wisdom that is very helpful in identifying the improved measures. They know their own problems and limitations and are willing to work to improve the efficiency of their operations.
Throughout the Caribbean, there is a rich history of agriculture and an ever-growing food import bill, plus high susceptibility to the impacts of climate change. By using a market-oriented approach for the sustainable development of food value chains, FAO is supporting Caribbean countries to reduce their food imports, increase exports, and attract private sector investment in high-potential value chains. In Belize, the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Saint Lucia, and several other Caribbean countries, the FAO Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean is working with government agencies, the private sector, and development partners to transform food and agriculture industries using this market-oriented approach to value chain development. The highly participatory and inclusive approach relies on the effective engagement and coordination between private and public sector value chain stakeholders to promote ownership of the development of high-potential value chains. It combines market research, a rapid production assessment, an examination of the roles of women and youth, and the risks of climate to identify the range of critical constraints and the opportunities to overcome them to build resilient industries. So far, using the approach has led to the design and implementation of industry upgrading strategies, selection of best fit solutions to improve production, which increases opportunities for formalizing agreements between buyers and farmers, as well as increased technical knowledge and capacity among public and private sector stakeholders. This multi-pronged approach also involves the development of business models to demonstrate the income-earning potential for farmers and is vital in securing investor buy-in. Investment and development finance in various industries will strengthen them and provide the requisite funding to ensure industry sustainability. Working on high-potential value chains offers direct economic benefits to those involved in these industries and to consumers who crave quality products originating from the Caribbean. FAO continues to support governments in transforming and building more resilient and competitive agriculture and food systems as we look to a future of lower food import bills, secure livelihoods, and thriving economies.
My name is Mary Glenda Japierre, but I love the name Glenda.
Well, Natisha Davis.
My name is Monsieur Senville.
My name is Midonia Williams Anthony.
These women are the face of a new wave of CMOS farmers in the eastern Caribbean island of Dominica and are part of local cooperatives established to grow the marine superfood. Natisha and Glenda work together in the Seaforce CMOS group in Calabishi on the island's northeast coast, while Medina and Murcia are members of the Grand Bay CMOS production group further south. There is another group in Woodford Hill, just a short drive up the coast from Calabishi.
In Calabishi, we love CMOS, and there is a lot of CMOS that has been grown in Calabishi. Not that we plant it, but it's grown, by God. So we love CMOS, and it was like a hobby.
This is a hobby no more, as many of the group members are seeking to supplement their income through CMOS farming.
Because our group is made up of more women than men, so that would be, the way of women empowerment. So yeah, that's why we study planting CMOS.
It will help the women be more independent. Right now, some women doing CMOS as a side job. So when the industry start growing and you start seeing dollar signs, you start seeing money, you can. Right now, CMOS will not be the side job again. It's going to be the sole income there for the women.
Dorian Sanford, technical officer at Dominica's Fisheries Division, sees the promise of a robust CMOS industry on the island.
So the division has embarked on a robust mission to develop the CMOS industry in Dominica.
Traditionally, in Dominica, CMOS was used in the production of beverages in cooking, and the wild species was sourced for this purpose. Over the years, demand has increased significantly, and producers began sourcing their CMOS from neighboring islands such as Grenada and St. Lucia. The Fisheries Division, through the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, has introduced the Euchema cottoni species from St. Lucia to Dominica in hopes of developing an industry that can meet this demand. To further support the sustainable development of the sector, national consultations were held with various stakeholders to determine the way forward. The FAO has provided equipment such as snorkels, wetsuits, and scuba fins to the farmers and provided hands-on immersive training through a CMOS farming expert from St. Lucia, Mr. Thomas Nelson. Topics covered included harvesting best practices, post-harvest handling, and site selection.
We from Fisheries Division, the technical officers, we learned a lot from that training. The farmers themselves learned a lot from that training. For example, the type of CMOS technique that we do in Dominica is the monoline technique, where we have one single line, about 110 feet, and we would plant the CMOS on the string. So with the intervention of Mr. Thomas, he introduce other techniques like the raft technique, or where we could cut the lines a bit shorter so to make them easier for harvesting and that type of thing. So I must say the groups, everybody turned out in large numbers from all locations, Grande, Woodford Hill, Calibishi, and they were very receptive to the information. And presently, you can actually see the groups putting those training that they learned from Mr. Nelson into action. And we are happy about that.
Happy because production levels have been visibly increased.
I must say that production level from the local CMOS to the new species, the Euchema cotonou, has doubled. So we now have groups now harvesting CMOS on a weekly basis, like anywhere between 400 pounds to 720 pounds of CMOS at present. So the CMOS industry really is an industry where the women can be managers of their own farm. They can grow the CMOS, they can use the product for themselves, and they can use the excess to sell to bring in an income for themselves. Yeah, so the CMOS industry is not an industry that is so labor intensive. So the women, they can fully participate in it. They can be managers of their own farm. They can have their own farm with people working for them and that type of thing. And the CMOS industry is a lucrative industry. So it can bring in both income and a source of food for their families. So the women CMOS farmers of Dominica will benefit a great deal from the FAO project.
I see expansion, I see more workers, I see more production, and in terms of the production, I see more money according to the super dollar signs on the products.
Because of the great demand of CMOS here locally and abroad, because I believe that there is a great potential in the CMOS to improve, to help to build the country, and not only the country, but people in the country, for those who decide to go into CMOS farming, where they can be able to provide for their families, they can be able to assist others.
In 5 years' time, I see that the CMOS production business not just being a farming part, but then in Dominica we have a factory. We have a factory for the juices, we have a factory for the pharmaceuticals, we have a factory for, the cosmetic part of it.
A successful CMOS industry is one where, our group generating enough money, enough finance that we don't have to look another place. We don't have to have another side job. It will be our main source of income that we can help our families.
The future looks promising for the women CMOS farmers of Dominica.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here in Value Chains. I'm Chrishane Williams James, and I'm the FAO Communication Consultant for the Caribbean Value Chain team, and I'll be your moderator for this event. We're happy to have you join us for this webinar being hosted by the Caribbean Value Chain Development Team of FAO's Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean based in Barbados. So this webinar follows the celebration of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, which was celebrated on September 29th, and in anticipation of World Food Day on October 16. It is geared towards educating farmers, middlemen, processors, and exporters on practices that enhance product quality, ensure regulatory compliance, and improve market competitiveness. Our aim is to share knowledge that will encourage good practices in packaging and processing of various commodities that are distributed in the Caribbean region. So we invite you to listen carefully and take notes. There will be a questions and answers section at the end. So please feel free to share any questions that you may have in the chat box on Zoom or on YouTube. Okay, this morning we are joined by the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean, Dr. Renata Clark, and our guest speaker, Dr. Rosa Rawl, FAO Senior Enterprise Development Officer and Team Leader for Food Loss and Waste for FAO's Food and Nutrition Division. We'll now invite Dr. Clark to share her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chrishane. Really pleased to be here with you and Rosa this morning. And as you've just said, we're right between 2 days, 2 commemorative days that are both relevant to this topic: the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste and the upcoming World Food Day. Improving packaging and processing within Caribbean value chains is essential for enhancing competitiveness of our food supplies in both domestic and international markets. This endeavor has implications to global goals and our commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and in particular SDG 12, which urges sustainable consumption and production patterns. In the region, especially in the Eastern Caribbean, FAO has been carrying out rapid assessments of agricultural commodities to determine which are likely to have the potential to positively impact the livelihoods of producers, of middlemen, processors, and exporters. And from these assessments, we see some opportunities for our value chain actors to be promoting product diversity, brand positioning, and to grow their market share by investing in the areas of processing and packaging. This webinar will examine 2 major points where commercial production and supply of agri-food produce directly and negatively affects producers, agro-processors, and exporters. Efficient packaging and processing are part and parcel of the objective of improving the sustainability of the region's agri-food system. Both help that we ensure that we can minimize avoidable food loss and reduce our environmental footprint by improving post-harvest practices and food transportation methods. Packaging preserves the quality and extends the shelf life of our products, but it also enhances their appeal to consumers. This is particularly important as there is an abundance of evidence to show that imports are outcompeting local products on both fronts. The type and form of materials for packaging can be a limiting factor for some value chain actors. In one of the value chains we're working in, dasheen, we see that the boxes being used are weak and they are typically not waxed. And this leads to damage because the boxes become deformed, don't provide protection. And once it's raining, without the waxing, there is further damage and deterioration of the product. Also, we see lots of exporters using nylon bags, which are cheap and widely available, but they include the potential to transfer diseases through the transmission of excess soils, creating both sanitary and phytosanitary concerns. But the expense and difficulty of finding adequate packaging materials has become clear, it's become evident that this is a major barrier to producers in the Caribbean. These days, producers are required to properly package and label their products and to communicate information like nutritional content to consumers. For niche products like CMOS and soursop, customers in international markets are also interested in learning where their products are sourced from, about the farmers themselves who produce the product. Improving the packaging for products with export potential enhances their marketability, which in turn attracts better prices for the producers. Improving packaging and labeling presents a significant opportunity for Caribbean products to stand out in the international market. For items like CMOS, dasheen, and soursop, enhanced packaging can prevent damage during transit and preserve the quality and visual appeal. Another aspect of some of our Caribbean value chains requiring attention is processing. When we consider modernizing processing would not only reduce waste, but also lower production costs and improve food safety by the more accurate control of process parameters that allow you to optimize the product characteristics. Processing can lead to some very lucrative opportunities in the region. For example, pork producers in St. Lucia have significant opportunity to process meat into specialty cuts, such as ribs and loins, which are currently in high demand. By capturing this market, which saw over $3 million spent on imports, this can be a big contribution to the 25 by 25 targets and for improving livelihoods for producers. You can see that processing and packaging practices are essential for regional food production because, as we've said, it enhances quality, extends shelf life, reduces waste, improves marketability, and they also have a bearing on the competitiveness of these products on both domestic and international markets. In this webinar, you will hear about sustainable practices to improve commercial processing and packaging taken from the experience of the Caribbean, so really concrete examples. And these will enable you to understand, practical measures that you can take to be improving your businesses. With this, I hand back over to Chrishane, and I'd like to take the opportunity to wish you all a very interesting and useful webinar.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clark. And thanks so much for those remarks and for sharing some of the challenges faced in packaging and the lucrative opportunities that exist in processing. These points are what make this webinar even more relevant and just provides a reminder of the importance of enhancing our packaging and processing practices so that we can not only minimize food loss and waste, but also increase marketability of our commodities. And on that note, Dr. Clark has given us a beautiful segue into the presentation of our guest speaker, Dr. Rosa Rall. So Dr. Rall is the FAO Senior Enterprise Development Officer and Team Leader for Food Loss and Waste from FAO's Food and Nutrition Division, and she's based in our headquarters in Rome. Dr. Rall, thank you for joining us, and we invite you to share with us now.
And good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, good morning. I think it's afternoon. It's just after 3 o'clock here in the afternoon. First of all, let me say across the region for inviting me to deliver this presentation. And we're really very pleased to see the high level of interest in this new publication on good packaging practices. And I think part of this is because of the fact that we took a bottom-up approach in terms of the development of this packaging, where we started off with a training program with UE, and that helped to inform what the needs, best to help to us to understand better what the needs of the region were. And also we had someone who had a lot of technical experience working first and foremost initially in the Caribbean region in Trinidad, Professor Melvin Pascal, and then also his considerable experience working first in the USDA and then currently as a professor at Ohio State in the area of food packaging. So many of the examples that you see in that publication actually originate directly from different stakeholders across the region. And I'm trying to see if I can advance my slides, but I may have to call on you, Christian, because this slide's not advancing at all.
No?
Right,
Okay.
so
Okay,
it's not
let me
moving.
try to see.
Is it?
Okay, I'm trying to see if I can assist.
Let's see if I can. Okay, I'll have to just go to the mouse.
Oh,
and okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll just use the mouse. Yes. Okay. So
Dr. Rawl, I'm
yes.
sorry. We're having persons ask if you can speak up a little louder. They're having a bit of a challenge hearing you.
Okay, let's. Is this better? Can you hear me any better? Is it improved?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay.
I believe so. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I will start off my the core of my presentation to give some a broad perspective on we heard a lot from Dr. Clark, but you know why it's so important that we have to do the things that we are talking about today, because what is happening is that our populations are growing. The world population is rapidly growing, and is expected to expand from the current 8.2 billion to close to 9.7 billion people by 2050. Now, what's happening also is that as populations continue to increase, we need to continue to feed people, and in a sustainable manner. We have to increase agricultural production in a sustainable manner, and also reduce the considerable levels of food loss and waste that currently occur in our food systems. FAO's data currently shows that an estimated 13% of the food that is produced globally is lost in the supply chain after harvest and before it reaches the retail market. And in the Latin America and the Caribbean region, we don't have disaggregated data for the Caribbean, but as a reporting region in the context of the SDGs, we're very close to that average number at 12.6%. Also, we have to ensure access to nutritious food for all at all times. And packaging can play a role in all of these two, and particularly the last two aspects. Food packaging plays a very critical role in our food systems. It supports the safe distribution of food over long distances. It helps to improve the shelf life for food and the storage process, and it contributes significantly to reducing food loss and waste and facilitates physical access to food. And also the first video that was screened this afternoon is actually one where we had a project that was implemented in Thailand, wherein packaging played a very significant role in terms of helping to not only improve the quality of the product, but also to reduce the significant levels of losses in the produce, even within the small package, within the small processing enterprises that we work in, we had to introduce within the confines of what they were doing, guidance in terms of transporting the produce from one stage of processing to another because of high levels of spillage. So in some cases, we had to introduce packaging within the actual processing operations to help to reduce the levels of losses. So it's not only what we see going out of the processing facilities, but there's quite a lot also that happens within the systems that we work on. And as I can go ahead and I will highlight some of the good examples as well. And we know that poor and inadequate packaging are a major underlying cause of food loss in perishable produce in many developing countries. In terms of FAO's data, an estimated 32% of the fruits and vegetables that are produced globally are lost in the supply chains, and they have the highest levels of losses taking place in fruits and vegetables. Now, if you recall, a few minutes ago, I talked about ensuring nutritious food for all. And what is happening in that context is that all of these nutritious foods are being wasted in the supply chain and not getting into stomachs because of poor packaging and poor handling of that fresh produce. And so these are things that we also have to work on in our part of the world, in the Caribbean, because we are making improvements in what is being done, but there's still a lot that needs to be addressed in that context. Now, in the publication, there's a lot of detailed and specific information. And what I try to do as I go along is not to try to repeat what is there, but to also, in the context of what we're discussing today, address some of the issues that were raised to me by the colleagues, so that at the end we can have also a fruitful discussion that is really context specific and appropriate to the needs of the project that is being discussed at hand. When we talk about packaging, packaging has 4 major roles. It helps to protect and preserve products. It provides, in that context, it provides physical protection from damage. And we just saw what the case of what is happening in terms of the fresh produce supply chains, where the types of packaging that are used, they fail to protect the produce adequately, because in some cases the packaging is not the correct size, it's not the correct shape. You get it's causes a lot of compression damage on produce that's at the bottom of the container, and that results in many countries and in many cases up to 1/3 of the produce that is going to the market is lost because of that level of compression damage. Then the structure and the shape of the baskets causes a lot of problems with respect to abrasion damage. So you get a lot of the produce, when it's unpacked at the market, is saleable, but at a lower cost. So this also results in economic losses, because when the produce is damaged, it can be sold, but at a lower price. So all of these factors we have to work on. Packaging protects from the factors that cause food spoilage, like microorganisms, dust, dirt, and water vapor. And we'll be talking about that in more detail later. And it also protects from the human element. For example, you have problems with pilferage, with counterfeit, and accidental and deliberate contamination, and proper packaging helps to work toward preventing this from happening and averting these types of possibilities. Packaging also is very important in terms of communication. It provides information about the nature of the product. It gives information about the nutritional content and quality of the products. And it also provides information about the best before and the use by dates. And I'll give an example of where and why that is so important a little bit later on. Because a lot of food is being thrown away because people buy food and they don't pay attention to what they have. And then suddenly they're cleaning out the cupboard and they say, but wait a minute. And they just look at the date on it and throw it away. But it's not always, you don't always need to throw that food away because there are 2 dates on your package. A best before date, which means that that food is of optimum quality. And so beyond that date, you have, if the food is properly packaged, you have at least 6 months to be able to use that food. Beyond that date, it can even be more 1 year in a lot of the cases for canned food, if the package is not at all damaged. And then you have the use by date, where there could be a food safety risk if that food is not is consumed beyond that date. And that's why we recommend, because it's something that we cannot always control, as in the case of a lot of the milk, dairy products. We always recommend to people that if it doesn't smell good, don't use it, don't eat it. And in some cases, you see, just like things like fish, where there's a very, very high risk, we say if it's past that date, just don't bother to try to eat it. So these are some of the things that packaging, again, these are some of the things that we really have to work on to educate people on, in terms of those issues of date marking that you see on a package, learning and understanding what it means so that you don't throw away food and waste it when it's still good and can be consumed. Packaging also provides convenience. It facilitates shopping, transportation, handling, open, dispensing, and then reclosure of products. But then again, later on, I'll give you some examples where that, while intended to help to provide convenience, it doesn't always do that, because it's sometimes the design of the packaging can also result in food waste, because that packaging doesn't allow the product that it contains to be effectively and efficiently accessible to the consumer. So that's another thing when we're looking at packaging, we have to ensure as you go along. And then it's also a very important tool for attracting consumers. And we've done quite a bit of work about it with that in that context for the region. For example, we've done a publication also on the issue of souvenir food packaging for tourists and those types of issues that really highlight when we are actually going out there to market a product, that it's a product that would be of interest and adequately and appropriately packaged, so that it would also invite consumers' interest and so that local producers in particular in the region have that opportunity to compete. Because many times when I worked in the region, people would say to me, well, our products are never appreciated. They're always on the bottom shelf. But sometimes when I went with them to see the products, they couldn't compete in the way in terms of their appearance. Now you see a lot more and better quality products, actually locally produced products in the region that are competitive. But at that time, really a lot more attention needed to be paid. And this is something that all the small producers have to be cognizant of. We always say nobody has to buy your product. You have to get people interested in what you're selling, and then your product will be sold. Unless it's something that really, that people must have, they're not going to really look at it if it's not appealing to them. Packaging value is found in its ability to address some of the systemic causes of food loss and waste, like maintaining food quality, prolonging the shelf life, ensuring food safety, and providing consumer information, as well as supporting trade. And food packaging contributes to sustainability through its effectiveness in reducing food loss and waste. And also it maintains a very low environmental footprint. The environmental footprint of food packaging across the food systems in 2020 was estimated at about 5%. It's very low as compared to the food that it contains. Because if we don't have packaging and we were to have food without any type of packaging, the environmental footprint of this spoilage of that food would be tremendous. And that's why, when we're talking about, as I go along, I'll discuss in more detail some of these issues. When people say packaging is bad, we have to really think about what it is we're talking about, because we cannot do without packaging. It's something because it protects the food, it contains the food, it has to transport that food and make sure that it's accessible and available. So what we have to do in the context of the packaging that we use is to ensure that that packaging, we can actually help to improve on the sustainability of packaging in our food systems, so that it doesn't continue to be a problem in the environment, where it just continues to cause pollution of the environment. And as I mentioned earlier, when we talked in the context of the functions of packaging, there's some of these issues that currently actually, in terms of the design of packaging, that can contribute to food waste. Some of these include, for example, the package size. This is something that consumers often will talk about and complain about, is that in some cases, package sizing is too big. And so that actually is one of the reasons why people tend to waste food. What I'm referring to is a study here that was conducted in the UK. Nevertheless, these are some very common complaints across the whole issue of household food waste in particular. There's another area where the ease of use of the package is sometimes an issue also, where it's impossible, and this happens a lot in some of these types of products, for example, where you have the upside down, I call them packages of like tomato ketchup and mayonnaise, where after you squeeze twice, it's impossible to get what's in the bottle out of it. And so that is actually often thrown away by consumers, and that contributes to food waste. And then we just talked about the date marking on the products. And this is an area where that needs a lot of consumer education again, because it would help when people understand better these what best before and use by refer to, then they become more conscious and decide, okay, that milk is used by, let me smell it. If it doesn't smell good, I'll throw it out. But so those are some of the things that we have to do. When we are considering and designing packaging strategies to reduce food loss and waste, there's certain things that one has to look at. If we are looking at, for example, whether or not we should, what types of product items we should be really investing in terms of packaging. We look at some of the trade-offs that would be had, and what we see there, the greatest environmental benefits from reduced food loss and waste through packaging for categories of food with a high environmental footprint, like meat and dairy products. They have, if you look at the chart on the right, they have a very high environmental footprint, because there's the whole meat and dairy products is very extensive the systems for producing meat are very extensive, and also they have a very, very high environmental footprint. So investing in packaging for meat, and it's something that makes a lot of sense. For lower types of those with a lower environmental footprint, one can get away with using and investing much less in terms of that. So nevertheless, it is important, it is very important that we invest in packaging of the types of products that are also very significant and important in our economies. For example, the case of bananas. We know that bananas, if they, when they're green, if they suffer any type of an abrasion damage, once they get to the market and they start to ripen, what happens? You lose the economic value, you lose the quality, because nobody is going to buy a banana that looks dark brown. And so what we also recommend is to look at options, sustainable options for packaging product, our fresh produce, using, for example, cardboard boxes, plastic crates, reusable plastic crates, to move that produce, to minimize any type of damage, to maximize economic benefit for the farmers. And we've done that in many countries, looking at what we can do to improve the whole system of packaging across different supply chains. I used to work a lot in Asia in the past, and we were able to actually get supermarkets on board in terms of having trained the farmers to be able to actually move that produce, move the packaging, instead of bringing it into the cities to do the packaging preparation, but they were able to give the small holders the opportunity to generate greater
Okay, it seems we are not hearing Dr. Rawl. I believe she might be having some internet challenges, so we do apologize for that, and we're going to try and get her back. If you could just bear with us one moment. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Rawl, we're seeing you now. Okay, we lost you there for a moment.
disconnected for a minute, and I'm not sure why. But one of the,
Okay.
just pick up here. I have to share
Okay.
again. Am I?
Yes,
okay.
please.
All right.
We're not seeing it yet.
Okay, can you see it? No?
Not yet. No.
Okay, I have to probably upload again. Okay. Escape. Why doesn't it? Can you see the screen?
Yes, but
Okay.
yeah, right. Perfect.
Okay.
Now we can. Thank you. Dr. Rawl, are you still there? Seems we have lost Dr. Rawl again. You know, these challenges will happen with technology, so we do apologize for that. I think she's online again, but we are still having a bit of a challenge.
Let's go. We think come back. If it goes
Okay.
off again, then I'll just ask you just if you can just stand by and let's get it going.
Okay.
I think it's on now. I'm on screen. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do now is to actually go into some more specific discussion now on some of the issues that were raised in terms of the types of things that you would like to learn or know about in the context of packaging of specific types of products. And so we start looking at, for example, the first case where was the whole issue of packaging of powdered spices. And of course, we know that spices, once you grind them, what happens, you increase the surface area of the product. And what that means is that there's a high possibility of losing a lot of the aromatic the components, the flavor components. And so whatever we do, we have to, if we want to keep the flavor potency of the spices, we have to find the most suitable types of packaging materials that keep them in airtight containers and also keep moisture out, because moisture will cause caking of the spices. I know, you see, when you have spices at home in a kitchen, and sometimes you come and you can't even get them out of the bottle because you probably didn't close that packet when the last time you use it, you didn't close it properly enough, and that's what happens. It absorbs the moisture, and then also it also can pick up sometimes bad, odors. So, and also, so these are some of the reasons why good packaging practice is very important in terms of all of the foods that we produce, but also spices are very high value products. And so they require, considering the amount of the cost of the attention in terms of producing them, and then packaging is very important if you want to really work toward attaining, deriving the economic benefit from the investment that went into producing those spices. So one of the most recommended types of packaging for spices is glass jars and metal containers, but they're very costly. Still very widely used, and in a lot of cases, people tend to like to use glass jars, and particularly for spices, because just the aesthetic appeal, what they look like, it's something people tend to like to see. And then you have the HDPE jars, but they do not always provide the required shelf life with respect to flavor retention. And quite often what I see happening a lot with the spices, like where I currently live in Rome, a lot of the times over time, you will see that they start to darken when you have them in these bottles. And I'm not sure, it's not necessarily because of the light. I am not sure if there is some sort of an interaction with the package, but that happens a lot, but unlike what happens in terms of glass. And then what we see happening now increasingly is the use of the stand-up pouches for packaging that are of spices that are made from flexible packaging. I was able to come across some data, and that's from India. As you know, India is one of the major suppliers of spices to many regions of the globe. And what we see is that quite often in a lot of developing countries and even in our region too, we really don't do very much and enough to promote the quality of the spices that we produce in terms of, the pungency, what they really, the potential that they have. This is something that probably requires a bit more research, because we look at a nutmeg as a nutmeg, but if you look at characterizing some of these types of produce item outputs from the region, you'll find that there's a lot of significant value to them. I remember working some years ago in Grenada, where there was this interest in specific varieties, wild varieties in the forest that had specific unique properties. And so this is another area that when we start looking into the value of a lot of the crops that are grown in the region, more needs to be looked into in terms of what it is that we're marketing and what can be done to enhance the quality of what it is we're marketing. And of course, packaging plays a critical role here. So in the context of some of the spices that have been, the spices inquire the packaging, issues related to the spices of concern, quite often the recommended, according to what I've seen and in the literature, a lot of the times is glass, but also according to what we see here in terms of the data from India, you have the paper, the laminated paper with foil that is very effective in producing, in actually helping to remove or reduce any kind of moisture. And also it's also a barrier to the losses of the oils, the volatile oils. Okay. Another area in which I was asked to address was that whole issue of packaging options for root crop flowers. And it's amazing to see what is happening in terms of the root crops, and particularly the dasheen crop that is being marketed in many countries from Asia, many countries in the Near East and Middle East, as a frozen vegetable crop in a number of different packaging formats. And later on, I will show you that. But now we're looking at the different categories of flowers that are produced from dasheen flower, the yam. And then what was interesting in looking at what is happening also in this context is that a lot of the crops that we produce and we eat only in basically one format, just as a cooked vegetable, we see that the dasheen is actually used as a base for producing different types of shakes because of the viscosity. So again, we have to look at how to diversify the opportunities and the options in terms of packaging to actually improve opportunities and to grow that production and that whole processing base. Now here you see also a broad spectrum of different types of packaging options for the various flowers. What is important in terms of packaging flowers is that you have to eliminate any possibility and to keep them dry so as to prevent caking of the flower over time. And so as you see here, you find that the packaged products tend to be in vacuum sealed packaging, like you see the taro flower, or also increasingly we see a lot happening in terms of the reclosable, resealable types of packaging, as you see with the yam flower and the taro flower. Now, later on in my presentation, I'll come to the issue of the kalo flower, which is in a compostable system of packaging. And I'll talk about that later when I talk about the moving into more let's say, the more environmentally friendly types of packaging, and this is one of them. Again, if you want to really begin to look at your products and give them that competitive edge, if you want to start to market them in other in foreign markets, in international markets, these are the kinds of things that you have to be thinking about and looking at, because we're living now in an era of sustainability, and those things are important. And then you see some of the paper bags, which have also laminated as well, and very, very useful, good in terms of keeping the products dry. So on the right-hand side, you see a number of other options. Now, there are a number of different types of equipment that are used for the packaging of different types of flour products. But one of the most frequently used is the vertical form, fill, and seal machines that are very simple, and they can be either automated, but you can also have the manual forms of the machines. And the types of packaging that they tend to produce, you see them up on the top left-hand side, that are used for packaging of different types of flours, flour mixes, pancake mixes, those types of things. What we're always accustomed to when we buy flour, like wheat flour, you have this block-shaped bag, which is very common, standardized way of packaging flour. When you go to the supermarket and you can for flour, that's what you have as in your mind as a shape of a bag. And that's the type of machinery is a block-shaped bag filling machine. But now what's happening, increasingly we see that you have flexible packaging, and the use of the die pack packaging machines that are used to produce these types of different shapes. Now the die packs are bags made of plastic, paper, or aluminum, and they have an extensible bottom that can stand, so that they can stand alone on shelves, even though they aren't made of rigid materials. And so quite now we see a lot of these types of packaging materials taken over. But later on, I will talk in more detail about some of the issues related to these types of flexible packaging materials, because they're very handy and, they offer a lot of great opportunities, but there are a lot of issues pertinent to their sustainability. And so we will discuss in more detail. What I wanted also to point out here as I'm talking is about the fact that that whole issue of gluten-free on the bottom package stands out. Now, many of the starches that are produced in the region, cassava starch, the plantain, many of these are gluten-free starches, but how many of our products actually highlight those unique properties of those starches? Those are some of the things that, as you continue to think about how you're going to package your products, these are some of the issues one has to consider. Okay, now I'm going to move into the issue of vacuum packaging. And it's a method of packaging where air from the interior of a package is completely removed to create a vacuum prior to sealing the package. And that involves you placing the food products in a plastic film package, and then removing air from them inside the package using a vacuum sealer, and then sealing the package. It's a very simple item of equipment. Of course, you have different packaging vacuum sealers that are of different levels of sophistication. But the whole idea is that vacuum packaging removes oxygen. It slows the rate of oxidative reactions. So it will slow the rate of lipid oxidation and protein oxidation. And it also limits the growth of anaerobic bacteria and fungi because you remove all the oxygen in a package. Now, coming to the issue of meat packaging, why do we package meat? We package meat and we refrigerate it to protect it against exposure to oxygen and heat, because those support the proliferation of spoilage bacteria and cause that meat to spoil very quickly. And there are some basic ways in which meat is packaged that really doesn't, it gives it a very, very short shelf life if it's not frozen. However, vacuum packaging removes, by removing the air from the package, the oxygen, you actually slow the process of oxidation and the growth of bacteria and mold, and you can store that meat at refrigerated temperature for a much longer period, about 2 weeks before it goes bad. And then it has a much longer 1 to 2 years when it's stored under frozen conditions and does not have and does not suffer from user burn. And here we see some of the benefits that can be derived through the use of vacuum packaging for meat preservation. First, it extends the freshness by removing the air, and the oxidation of the meat is slowed so that meat continues to remain fresh. It protects against freezer burn because it doesn't come into the meat does not come into contact with air that can lead to moisture loss and changes in temperature. It helps to preserve the flavor of the meat by preventing infiltration of foreign aromas and odors, because everything is properly sealed. And vacuum packaged meat is also space saving, because as the product takes the package takes the shape of the product, and then it can be easily packaged and move around very easily and tightly packed in the refrigerator or freezer. And of course, it minimizes the risk of cross-contamination with other foods in the refrigerator or freezer. Whereas if you package, for example, meat in a butcher paper or in some of the types of packaging that you see very commonly in the supermarket, you can have that drip that can also cause cross-contamination. And it also allows for very simple proportioning of the product that you're actually selling. So it's because everything is already individually packaged and so much easier to apportion. So there's a lot of very positive and very good opportunities that can be had by vacuum packaging products, meat products. Specifically in the case of pork, you would get a very short shelf life if it's just not vacuum packaged, but in the refrigerator at about 5 degrees, it would have a shelf life of 4 to 7 days. If it's vacuum sealed, but still at 5 degrees, that same temperature, it would last for 20 to 28 days. But if it's not vacuum sealed, but it's in the freezer at minus 15 to minus 18, it has a shelf life of 4 months. But look at what happens when you go to vacuum sealing at minus 15 to minus 18. You can get 1 to 2 year shelf life. And so these are some of the things that when you start to look at your target market, what do they require? What can they absorb? Those are some of the things that you have to start to think about in terms of where you want to invest, what makes sense in terms of which way you would like to go in terms of marketing that product. In the case of seafood, also vacuum packaging is utilized, and it allows that product to be stored for 1 to 2 years, and it's best consumed within 6 to 12 months. But quite often now, particularly in Rome, I just took this picture at home. You see a lot of products like this in the supermarkets where it's already pre-prepared in a vacuum packaged container, where it's already marinated and it's vacuum packaged, and so it's easy to just cut through and remove the product. But now with all the concerns about plastics, I think that we'll see a lot of changes in terms of what is being used, in terms of the types of trays that are currently being used for these types of products. One of the concerns is that you have to look at the fish and the quality of the fish flesh. So if it's a very soft flesh, fish, very, where it separates easily, unlike something like the salmon that is really easy to pack it, to seal directly, it must be frozen to maintain that integrity before it is sealed. So this is something that has to be done. And in the context of the use of vacuum packaging for cured meats, vacuum packaging is also very effective for enhancing the shelf life of cured meats. Cured meats can be kept 5 times longer than with other methods, up to 4 to 6 months, provided that the package is not at all damaged or exposed to direct heat sources or placed in a damp location. Because if that package is punctured and you get oxygen in there, you can have problems with the aerobic contamination. Now, in the context of marketing of frozen, the different types of products that one can do in terms of the dasheen, here's some examples. And dasheen is being used in a number of different packaging formats, and also it's something that is being done quite frequently in many parts of the world, where you see, for example, the fresh food from Vanuatu being organic dasheen being exported in just packaged in plastic bags. Or in some other regions, I think one of the vacuum package is done in China, and then here's another example on the left-hand side being done in Hawaii. So this is something that, again, it's in the technologies generally in the individually quick frozen product that is packaged. It's dipped and, it's peeled, it's clean, dipped, and then it's packaged. But the challenge with packaging is that it has been demonstrably linked with high levels of plastic waste, as well as low rates of packaging reuse or recycling. And this is something that is, something we have to address, because also in the region, we do have a problem also with packaging waste. It poses a challenge for the Caribbean region because there are over 320,000 tons of plastic waste that remain uncollected on an annual basis in the Caribbean. And that's according to a World Bank study conducted in 2023. And so many of the islands we know have already measures to reduce plastic pollution in the Caribbean, but it's something that we cannot ignore, because it's something, as we talk about packaging, we need to address. I talked earlier about the whole issue of the flexible plastics, because sometimes when people see those paper bags, they think they're paper, but they're not. They are paper, but with a laminate of a flexible package. And these are of major concern at this time in particular, where I think there's an OECD report that was just released that talks about some of the challenges related to the disposability and the degradation of types of plastics in the environment, because they're very difficult to recycle, and there are a lot of problems in terms of their use as their shelf life, the fact that they remain in the environment. And so while they're very effective in terms of being lightweight and they present a lot of good opportunities, we still have to deal with that issue of the persistence in the environment. And globally, only 9%, that's according to an OECD report, only 9% of plastic waste is recycled, while 22% is mismanaged. And so, when we look at the amount of plastics that occur in the environment, in our work to address these issues, and as we go along in terms of looking at what it is that we really can do to improve on the sustainability of our food systems in general, and especially in terms of the products that we are packaging, we have to start to look at identifying and utilizing more sustainable options. And one of those is the use of biodegradable packaging or compostable packaging. The most widely adopted now is the one I highlighted on very much earlier in my presentation, which is the compostable packaging. Biodegradable packaging works generally, but in a number of cases, you still have problems when you have products that have a high moisture content. It's not always you have, so quite often you do have challenges with those. But the compostable packaging, we see it increasingly being used in a number of products. I recall buying mangoes in the supermarkets here that come from Brazil in compostable packaging, and very sustainable form of packaging. And what is nice about the compostable packaging is that when it breaks down, it turns into compost, which acts as a valuable fertilizer and enriches the soil. But international standards call for a 60% degradation level to be met within 80 days for a product to be called compostable. And that is very important if you want to begin to take up the use of compostable packaging, and particularly if you're going to be exporting that product. Biodegradable and compostable plastics, particularly within flexible packaging applications, they represent a key opportunity for reducing harmful health, environmental and societal impacts of plastic waste without compromising the operations of supply chains. However, in order to make, and these environmental benefits are only enabled if they are correctly disposed of by the end user. And when you buy the products that are packaged in these types, in the biodegradable, and particularly in the compostable packaging, there are signs and indications on the package. I just couldn't find one example of one today, but those signs already indicate to you how to properly dispose of the packaging. And this, if properly disposed of, and as a responsible consumer, if you pay attention to what's on the package of the product that you are buying and dispose of it properly, then that also helps in terms of reducing that the level of contamination of the environment and contributing to that. So these are some of the things that one has to do. Make sure that the packaging is disposed of in the correct bin when you're actually disposing of it. And then, of course, when it's collected, that by whatever system, that, of course, it's properly managed. Now, the last option that we have to look at is finding ways to get that packaging out of the environment and stop it from going into landfills. And especially, that's another challenge when we were talking at the beginning about food loss and waste, because when food is sent to landfills, quite often that food goes in packaging. What happens there is that you also begin to have not only the packaging problem, but also the food waste rotting in the landfill creates methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas that contributes also to greenhouse gas emissions. So whatever we do in that context, we have to start looking at redesigning the packaging that is being utilized and finding ways of keeping that packaging out of landfills. And also in that context, reducing the amount of packaging that we use, because some packets are some foods are truly overpackaged. So we have to consider all of these things to find solutions and ways in which to reduce that type of packaging, that packaging waste that goes into the environment, We also want to do a lot more in terms of, getting at reducing also the impacts that on the environment, and doing a lot more in terms of recycling and use of packaging as well. And that happens not in everything, but in a lot of respects now. For example, a lot of supermarkets are doing where you can bring your packages, and then you can get, whatever you want in your own container. That is beginning to happen more frequently, so that the consumer takes that responsibility. And that's, you have in some supermarkets, but it's a specialty type of service. And then also finding ways, for example, what we have done with the plastic crates that we have introduced into many countries. It's a form of using reusable plastic crates so that have a shelf life of 6 years, rather than countries where people were always using plastic bags, single-use plastic bags that accumulate in the environment. So finding simple and innovative solutions, as well as adopting more sustainable forms of packaging, will make a significant difference in terms of those problems that we face now in terms of packaging. So with that, I say thank you for your kind attention. And I also invite you to take a look at our technical platform on the measurement and reduction of food loss and waste, where a lot of the work that we do that addresses food packaging is documented. And in that process, if you're interested, we're most welcome to join the community of practice on food loss and waste. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rawl. You have certainly given us a lot to think about. And, we'd like to thank you for sharing your experience with us and educating us on the importance of packaging for protection and preservation, containment, convenience, communication and marketing, and so many salient points that you made in terms of how we can sustainably package to reduce our environmental footprint and just to safely process our food as well. I think it gives us a lot to think about in terms of the way we're currently doing things in the Caribbean. So this has been truly, truly informative and educational as well. We will now invite questions from the audience, from those joining us online. So I have one question so far from Dr. Greg Robin, and his question is, for cinnamon, the dried bark, what would you recommend as the best way to store it?
Okay. Cinnamon is, I think all the types of spices that we produce, we have to, there's certain things that we have to protect. We have to protect them from, from losing their aroma. We have to protect them from exposure to moisture and all of the factors that could compromise their quality. And so it's recommended that you keep them it's either in glass containers or preferably in many of the places we've worked on spices, especially the high value spices, you tend to keep them also in metal containers, tins that are properly sealed. We have to protect them also from the exposure to all of the different elements. So we keep them in a very dry place. You can't have them in a container where they're exposed to the elements, or where there's the potential for any kind of condensation within that container. So it has to be cool, dry, and well protected. So that you don't, and properly sealed, so that you don't lose the aroma of the spices.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rawl. I see one hand raised, Mr. Bristol Lawrence. Do you have a question? Okay, I'm not hearing Mr. Lawrence. Okay, but I see that Mr. Daniel Lewis has a question. Mr. Lewis? Oh, you have lowered your hand. You still have a question?
Yes. My question is, I know part of the post-harvest management of fresh commodities is the whole question of trying to enhance shelf life. But what we have observed in Grenada, Grenada imports apples because we are a tropical country. But what we've seen increasingly is after purchasing apples, you have it in a refrigerator for probably 6 weeks, 2 months, and it don't go bad, which is very unnatural. So from my perspective, there are so many people who ask, are apples safe to eat? Is it the very prolonged shelf life? Has it anything to do with, a lot of chemical added to prolong shelf life, which might impact people's health? So from your perspective, what do you think is happening to this apple? I mean, it's unnatural for fruit to have that long shelf life. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your very interesting question. But, this is something that also when we're looking at these types of produce items, normally apples are dipped into certain, after they're harvested and cleaned, they are dipped into something that coats the surfaces of the apples, and that helps to regulate the rate of respiration of the apple, and that's what slows down the rate at which the apple will decompose and degrade. So because after the fresh produce is alive, it's breathing and not. What it does is it just slows it down, and that's why it takes such a long time to decay. Now, this is something that offers a lot of potential, even for countries like our countries in the region, because this edible, it's the coating of these types of produce items with what we call edible films or edible packaging films can make a big difference in terms of a lot of the produce that we grow. There's a group in California, for example, that developed from food waste. They developed one of these types of edible packaging films that they use on, and I didn't think of it until now that you mentioned it, but I should have remembered to do so. That can be used on limes. They use it on the avocados, on a number. It's not possible on all types of crops, but on crops that tomatoes, avocados, it can be used. You dip them in those in these types of or treat them with these types of films. Film forming, they form a film, and that helps to regulate the rate of respiration of the exchange of and it makes a big difference, because I recall that it extends, for example, the shelf life of the avocado by 4 weeks, and that's significant. So yes, we in the Caribbean have the potential to actually produce some of these because of the types of the starches, the cassava starch, some of these types of starches. I was watching, for example, the video on what is being done with in Dominica, which is my homeland, with the different what's it called, the sea moss and the alginates. Those are also very good examples, the alginates that are being used. And for example, in places like Indonesia, they're using a lot of these types of materials in the development of these types of products for edible packaging and helping to extend shelf life. So these are opportunities that really need to be looked into also in our region, because they're not toxic in any way. Most of them originate from food. the product, for example, that was developed in at UC Davis that is being used and it's being growing all over the world, it came from food waste. So there's a lot of work now, research going into those things, and I think it's something that could be really looked at really in the Caribbean context. Did you have another question?
Okay.
I just wanted to add on what you said. For example, in Grenada, two products that had enormous potential for export, but for which, you know, the shelf life is so limited, are breadfruit and dasheen. So typically when you have breadfruit and dasheen, if you don't put it in a refrigerator, in a day or two, it'll get ripened. So in light of what you said, I think some trials need to be done, because if it is that we could get breadfruit with a longer shelf life by using what you just mentioned, it could significantly enhance, you know, the shelf life and thus potential. For example, I look at cassava in a lot of these Central American countries. What they do, they wax cassava, and then a simple produce procedure that enhances shelf life. So maybe the shelf life, you know, is a thing. How could we enhance shelf life in some of our commodities? It could really, really play a key role in enhancing export of these.
Yeah, I think that's, if you have students at UWI, that's a nice project to look at. It's the kind of thing that really could make a difference with something like the breadfruit, because it's, again, high respiration rate that causes it to just spoil in 2 days. And, you know, cassava was the same thing. It was what, 24-hour shelf life until they started to wax it.
Yes.
So these are some of the things that certainly can be looked at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Sure. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Lewis and Dr. Rawl. We have another question from Miss Evelyn Elliott, and she asked, do you think regional agricultural departments could possibly curb these problems, the problems that we have with packaging and processing, on a united front by building a factory for making sustainable packages in order to reduce the overall importation of those packages?
I think,
you want me to repeat? Okay.
Yeah, I think that the policies and the regulations that have been implemented, developed not only in the Caribbean region but in many countries, there needs to be a system to incentivize people to do better and more in terms of this whole issue of packaging. Otherwise, nothing will change. And so maybe, you know, it's something that has to be raised in, you know, even from the technical perspective. When we supported the work with UWI in terms of the design and the development of this training, the guide, the technical report and guide, this is one of the things that was also discussed in the context of plastic packaging, that, you know, it's not just putting a ban is not really going to make a difference. Why? Because the people who are using packaging, and we have to face it, how do they select a lot of the packaging that they are using? They look for what is the lowest cost. I remember when I used to train people when I worked in Asia to try to get them to move from using plastic bags to plastic crates for transporting their produce. And they used, the beginning, when we tried to talk to them about it, they said, no, ma'am, no, because this is the cheapest option that we have. But when you show them the benefit is not only, you know, they see the benefit in terms of quality of their produce and the shelf life and the market opportunities, and then you start to say, and then you start to sensitize them about how that is positively impacting the environment, then they start to feel like they're contributing something as well. And so I think there's a mindset and a mind shift that needs to take place. sensitizing consumers, like maybe some type of campaigns, but also the incentive has to be there to get people to make that shift. And that may require policy as well, to support that SME sector, so that people can be incentivized, probably incentive for some measure of incentivizing people to use this by reducing taxes. There are different ways that the governments can try to help to play a role in terms of some of these things. It doesn't have to always be legislation, but different ways. And these are some of the things that, for example, working to address reduction of food loss and waste. Many governments are taking always a softer approach in those things, because if you clamp down on people, it doesn't work, and help to get people on board. But I think the whole issue of maybe campaigns probably need to be launched to, again, that awareness and sensitization could very likely make a good start the ball rolling on those issues.
Yes, I agree with those points, especially in terms of changing behavior. That takes a lot to do. Okay, and we have thank you very much, Dr. Rawl. We have another question from someone joining us on YouTube. And the question is, how can we improve the shelf life of dasheen?
Okay, dasheen, I think dasheen, I'm not sure what is the shelf life of dasheen, but I don't think, how long is it? A few days. It's longer than the cassava, I know, but I don't have a number in my memory at all about the dasheen, right? But there's a lot of good potential to do a lot with dasheen that you can't do with you can't always do with the starchy staple crops. Because as you saw in some of my the pictures I showed, when you freeze dasheen, it still maintains its integrity. But some of the other crops you find, like if you freeze the breadfruit, for example, the structure of the starch changes significantly. And so, and also what I've seen with dasheen is that it's something that has a lot of, is very widely known internationally and consumed. And in my presentation, I also mentioned that it's being used now, not only as what we do in the Caribbean as a root vegetable, but it's also being used now as a thickener an ingredient in producing a lot of shakes, the vegan types of shakes and things like that. So this is where we need to be looking at what we can do and more and better off in terms of the value added opportunities to maximize the potential use of the dasheen along those lines. Yeah, but the only things for the root crops, generally, it's about treating them, making sure they reduce the different systems, the fungicides and so on that are required to help to enhance the shelf life and to maintain their quality when they're exported. But when you see the risks that exist and this whole issue of trade is better, I think, where dasheen is concerned, the better option would be to do as much of the primary processing in the country, in the exporting country, and then start to look at also the value added opportunities in some countries, I think the Philippines and in some Asian countries also. These types of starches are also used for ice cream as a base for producing ice cream. So there's a lot of opportunities that we still have not yet exploited very much in the Caribbean, and the potential is there.
Okay. Well, thank you for that information, Dr. Rawl. Okay, so we have another question from Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence? You
Yes,
can go
good
ahead.
morning. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Brawl. Well, my initial question was to do with breadfruit and what is currently being done right now to prolong the shelf life. I also had similar question for dasheen in terms of what is the best fungicide that we can use as a replacement for red meal. But breadfruit would be my primary question.
Okay. To prolong the shelf life of breadfruit?
Yes.
You know, the rapid rate of respiratory rate of the breadfruit is something that we have to address. I think there is a, when you think about what is now happening in the context of the edible packaging and those packaging films, this is where probably we need to be going with breadfruit. In terms of developing the same sort of systems that would help to reduce that respiration rate, the exchange. So a dip. The other thing is, again, packaging. The type of packaging is one option. Of course, that's, again, it's a good thing and it's not a good thing because you will, you'll probably wind up having to choose because breadfruit, the value of breadfruit is low. So you can't go and invest in too high a type of packaging if you're packaging breadfruit in individual packages in plastic. But that would make a difference if you have the right permeability, or if you were to use modified atmosphere packaging of the breadfruit. That could help to make a difference in terms of slowing down the rate at which it is respiring, and that would help to extend the shelf life. So there are different ways of doing it without having the using chemicals as well. But of course, again, the different, you would have to look at cost and benefit to see what makes sense in the context of breadfruit because of it's really low, in terms of the cost, really. So these are some of the things. I think we really need some more research on some of these crops to really see what provides the best cost benefit, and see what would be best recommended to do that. But it's an issue of managing the rate of respiration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rawl. Does that answer your question, Mr. Lawrence? I see your hand still raised. Do you have another question?
That's fine. That's fine. I think it come back to doing the necessary research. So that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
But
thank
if
you.
I'd like to say that if I come across any material, I'll share it with our colleagues so that they can share it with you. But I really haven't been at all directly engaged with the breadfruit. So, but if I find anything in terms of where these issues are at, because there's a lot of research now, particularly looking at those two things, the modified atmosphere packaging, for a lot of the tropical crops, as well as this whole issue of, again, the edible films. So I will share it with our colleagues.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rawl. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I think one question that we had also was in relation to the EU and Great Britain having recently announced changes to the pesticide maximum residue levels, and that may be affecting some of our producers in the region. Is there anywhere where we can find detailed guidance on how these changes in general, just to ensure that we can comply?
I would recommend the people who work with those issues are, I don't know, the two different divisions, I would think, would be doing that. Our food safety people would definitely be aware of what is happening, but also the people working on the, was it plant protection and issues, the quarantine, would be the two groups that would be able to address those issues more precisely than I could at this time.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, since it doesn't seem we have any more questions from Zoom or live stream. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Rawl, for sharing your experience with us. As I said before, it has been a lot of information, and I think we have more to think about. We have more to do. But for those of us who are interested in learning more, I'd encourage you to have a look at the publication that Dr. Rawl referenced earlier in her presentation. I have shared the link to it in the chat, so you can look at that whenever you have some time. And you can also reach out to us for any additional information or questions, and we'd be happy to support, just to give you some support and answer any questions you may have. But before we go, again, thank you, Dr. Rawl, for joining us, for sharing all of this with us. Thanks for those of you who have joined us on the different platforms. And of course, special thanks to the FAO Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, as well as our regional office in Chile, who have assisted with all the arrangements for the webinar, and also to Mr. Jefferson Jaikisoon for spearheading this webinar, coming up with the idea and really pushing forward with it, and to the entire value chain development team led by Mr. Juan Sheas Pelaez. Thank you all for your support and for being with us here today. We wish you all a wonderful day. And again, if you have any questions, please let us know and we will be in touch. The video, I see someone asking, how do we get this video? So I can share the link to the live stream. I'll share it in the chat as well so that you can go back and watch whenever you'd like. So I've shared it there. And Dr. Rawl, someone is asking if they would be able to have your contact email.
Yeah, certainly.
As well.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll share that in the chat as well. And if you have any more questions, again, you can reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining, and we wish you all a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rawl.
Sure, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.